Photography is interesting. And Chuck Close, the artist, he talks about photography being the easiest art to pick up, but the hardest to develop a voice in. Probably, especially now, because it's so ubiquitous, it's so everywhere. Everyone has a camera in their pocket. So to actually have a voice in photography, now I think to get to that point is I think is the goal as a photographer, to be able to have someone say, oh, I know that that's yours. I know that that's your piece. Now with post-production, with Lightroom and Photoshop, you could do a lot of stuff in post. You could have a certain style, but sometimes that's just kind of putting a style over your image. But that is the goal. I think that is the goal. And the answer is keep doing it. You just got to keep doing it. Pick up the camera, go out as much as you can, create as much as you can, edit as much as you can. All the work that you do culminates into finding your voice.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, brought to you by CloudSpot. Each week on the show, we interview the world's most interesting photographers to find out what it really takes to capture beautiful images and compelling stories so that you can start to do the same. Welcome back, photo friends. Today, we have documentarian photographer, author, and photo curator, Michael Rababy. Michael has released several photo books over the past few years. His most recent is called California Love, a visual mixtape, and in it there are over 600 photos from more than 100 Californian photographers, where they all share kind of their experience of what it's like to live and create in California. It is a really enjoyable book with a ton of variety. If you get a chance, please check it out. It's so much fun. Now, in this episode, Michael shares kind of the basics of how to create a book, but then we dive into his wheelhouse of curating. So how to choose which images stand out above the rest, how to develop your style and voice as a photographer. Tons of stuff on offer today. Really fun conversation. I know you're going to enjoy that. With that, let's go ahead and get on into this interview with Michael Rababy. Michael, I just want to start off nice and easy. I want to know, when did you first know that photography was going to play an important role in your life?
Thanks so much for having me. It's funny. I have a vision of being super young and seeing myself like this is, I like so young, just because you don't really know what you're going to do when you get older. And I had this vision of me directing for some reason. I have no idea where that came from. I was like a kid in Ohio, but I watched a lot of TV. I love Sesame Street. Probably because I lived in a suburb and I was somehow drawn to the urban aesthetic, I think, and like those trash cans and those brownstone stoops. Somehow I was always drawn to that. So I just was obsessed with Sesame Street. And I was why doesn't my neighborhood look like this? And now I live in the city of Los Angeles. So I it's not so much photography, it's directing and photography. Although if you really want to get into it, I was in 7th grade and my school had like some Halloween fair and my friend's mom was like a fortune teller thing. And she told me, oh, you're like a triple Pisces and I could see you being, or you're a photographer. Like, so somehow I was told that I was a photographer. And so maybe that planted in my head. And then I'm a big dreamer. So maybe I went off on that, but it's funny because I now that I'm older, I think that if you look back in your life and the things that you did when you were like 6th to 8th grade, the things that you obsessed over, I think that's an early seed of what will probably make you happy for the rest of your life and what you'll want to do. And I've always been like a collector and I was always obsessed with movies and like watching scenes over and over again. I had like a VHS, I had 2 VHS machines, or we did in the house. So I would, make dubs of movies so I could watch them over and over and over again. And I grew up in North County, San Diego. Well, I was in Ohio till I was 10. Then I pretty much grew up in San Diego. You'd think, oh, beautiful weather, you'd be at the beach. But no, I was in my bedroom watching movies all day. Like that was what I was obsessed with. And then I got into making, videos and film, video production when I was like starting in high school and got into editing and shooting video. And then I really got into photography more seriously when I was in college. I had the opportunity to study abroad in Florence, Italy for a semester, my sophomore year. And I took a photography class and I had this incredible teacher who just really inspired me. And not just him, but also just being in Florence, Italy, like everything was just so picturesque and just visually stunning. I mean, you could walk down an alley and take a photo of a trash can and it looks like, high art, just everything is just so beautiful when you're there. And also I was very inspired, being away from America for the first time really. And I had this great instructor who, funny enough, his name was James White, and he's very successful photographer. He did like the Twilight movies, and he does like magazine covers. And I recently reconnected with him because he's getting into publishing. So we could talk about this later, because I've had a couple books, published now, and so we've reconnected. But yeah, so really it was like college. And I just was really obsessed. And this is, film, and this is being in a dark room, and this is when, you're on a student budget, so you're buying large spools of film, and you're making film rolls yourself, so I'm packing as much film as I can, because if you buy film commercially, it's 24, 36, usually exposures, but I would try to jam like 40 or 50 exposures in see as much as I can, so when you go out, you don't have to like replace the roll as much. And then I don't know if he was allowed to, but he gave me the keys of the dark room. So I would just do these all-nighters where you're just totally geeking out over burning and dodging and making the perfect print from your negative, and just spending, and then like, you come out, this heroic moment as the sun is rising, and you got the right print, the silver gelatin print. And now it's much different. Now I just spend all this time on my computer,
right,
in Lightroom. I love digital. Like I'm not complaining at all, but yeah, but that was it. It was studying in college. And it's interesting now that I'm curating and I'm exposed to younger photographers. I have a show up right now, and we have someone who's a senior in high school who's showing, and a lot of younger people are really kind of getting back into darkroom, into analog, and that tactile element, because it's much more precious than, everyone has a phone on their cell phone now, right? Everyone has a camera on their cell phone right now. So the analog process is this unique kind of a novel kind of thing.
Isn't that
so
so
yeah,
strange?
so great. I think it's great. It's funny because it's like, so I think the visual language of younger people is so different from what it was from, when I was younger.
Sure.
And I think it's great. Yeah. It's just in the way that it's like everybody speaks English, but not everybody, is a poet or speaks eloquently. Everybody has a camera. Not everybody is a great photographer.
Yeah.
I think I've been doing it now for decades. So it's kind of second nature for me, but but that's the thing. Just because everyone has a camera doesn't mean that everyone has the same, aptitude for it.
When you went to study abroad and you brought your camera with you, I'm always interested in that that learning phase, because I feel like lots of new photographers look at photography as like, wow, if I just had a great camera, I'd be able to capture all these great moments. And then they get the camera and then realize that it's a pretty technical thing, so when you first started in photography, were there any technical struggles that you had to overcome?
It's interesting, and I read somewhere that like obsession over the tools is more of a male thing. Like I had read that like female photographers aren't as like obsessed with cameras. It's more of like a male thing, and there are people that really get obsessed over the tool, and it doesn't necessarily translate to their work being any better. I've never really been much of a techie person, or, I guess for me, I respect the craft, and I learn as much as the craft that I can to express what I want to express, what's in my head, or what I want to document. But really the camera is just a tool. And now you could take great photos again with your cell phone, and you could take great cameras with a plastic Holga a camera, which you could get for under $50. And I think it's really, for me, I've always been gravitated more towards the art, I guess, than the craft. I think you need to have both. And I think the craft, I obviously have a huge respect for the craft, but I think if you look at one print that's just really, really well crafted but boring, I'd rather look at something that maybe is kind of a little sloppy but just really packs an emotional punch, in my opinion.
I like that. But what about like those early days when obviously you're shooting on film? Were you shooting point and shoot, or were these like full manual cameras?
Yeah, no, I had a Nikon. I've always kind of gravitated towards Nikon. It might be the font of the Nikon logo. It might be, I had friends that had Nikon. When the full frame cameras first came out and I switched from film, I bought the Canon 5D Mark I, and then I realized I think it did not have a flash built in, which I didn't realize. So then luckily the Nikon, I think it was the 200 came out. So then I switched to the 200, and then I got the 700, I think, and now I have the 800. But I'm really bummed that Nikon and a lot of the pro cameras, they don't give you built-in flash anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's, as a street photographer, you want the smallest thing possible. So I don't want to have this other extra thing that I'm adding on because I can't be sneaky that way and not to like put it on and turn it on, or you have it on the whole time. I mean, I'm not shooting at a wedding or an event. I don't want to have this like extra flash on top. I want to get the Z9 or the 9Z, whatever the new Nikon, but they're not putting on a built-in flash, and I guess maybe I have to live with it. I know the low light capability is much better, but so I still have my D800. I think the 850 did not have a flash, to my recollection, which would have been the upgrade. So I have the last one, I think, that still has the built-in flash. And the reason why I like the built-in flash is not so much at night, but like during the day, I like to shoot like into the sun, and I like to have like an extra fill to get like, detail in the face, or to really catch eyes, and or like, you're shooting into something that like has some shadow and you want just like a little bit, to play with. So if Nikon, if you're listening, like Russia, if you're listening, Nikon, if you're listening, just throw us a bone. I'll pay an extra couple $100.
Right.
Just give me the option. Just a little, doesn't have to be great, just a little fill and flash on the camera, so then I'm one and done.
It's so funny.
So I had a Nikon. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go on. I get excited sometimes.
So to finish the thought. So I had a Nikon. It was not a point and shoot. I mean, it was, it was manual, but it had, it had like the meter built in. It wasn't like the really old ones where it was completely manual. It did have like a program setting, I believe, but it's great. It's like when you're starting out driving, it's great to have a stick shift. You want to be able to really understand the machine, so it's good to start manual, understand, aperture, shutter speed, the basics, and then, then you could go from there.
Were you always very proficient in shooting manual, or was there a steep learning curve for you?
No. I mean, the type of photography that I do, I don't really have like a lot of time. I'm like, I see something that's happening and I just want to get it right away. So I'm shameless about just keeping it in program mode. I mean, there are people who like think in terms of aperture all the time, and like they'll walk into a room and they'll adjust their camera to whatever the lighting is at the time. And I don't have that. I'm not that autistic.
Right.
I don't have that. Yeah. My mind's on other things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm shameless. I'm shamelessly shoot in program mode. And then, I'll see if I got it. And then, but one thing I do now is I'm able to control where my exposure is, where in the frame I want to set the exposure to. So I'll do that. So I'm telling the camera that I want I want exposed for this part of the frame, So that's one thing that I do constantly. I have a setting on my camera that I could do that.
You know what? This is kind of off topic, but the Ricoh, I believe, camera maker, they make now that I think about it, I think they only make one camera. The Ricoh GR or something like that. Anyway,
the GR3, really, I just bought it.
Did you really?
I just bought the GR3. Yeah.
It has a mode which no other camera that I've ever seen has, where it will automatically expose for the brightest thing in the frame, which is really interesting. So now every photo that you get can be like stylistically very underexposed except for the highlights. And I was really interested in that, thinking, of all the possibilities, and immediately thinking of all the photos of, I don't know, people looking into the sun, and being able to see their outline or something. Anyway, I thought that was a very cool tool, and you would think that more cameras would have that, but I forget where I was going with that, but it doesn't matter.
No, that's interesting, because then digitally, because then it's not going to be blown out, and then you could always go in and like, brighten it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
I know that you today do, as you said earlier, you curate, you look at a lot of photos, and I want to talk about your book that I got here, California Love, a Visual Mixtape. And this thing is, first of all, massive. And second of all, there's a lot of photos that I guess I'll let you talk about the book and kind of where it came from. But there's a lot of photos in this book, and what I want to get to eventually here is how you came up with all the photos in here. Like, what makes one photo better than another? Because it's a collection of photos from many different photographers. So that must have been a huge job. So before we get into that, tell me and tell the listeners about the book. Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, the California Love, a Visual Mixtape is my COVID baby. It came from an annual exhibit that I curate at the Hive Gallery and Studios, downtown Los Angeles. I've been doing it. This is my 8th year. I actually have a show up right now. It's 2022. So 2 years ago in 2020, I changed the theme every year. We've done like a fine art theme. We've done street photography. We've done naked versus nude one year. We had analog versus digital, and we had alternative alternative process one year. And then for 2020, I'm pretty political. I knew that it was going to be a really contentious election year after 4 years of the last administration. And California is pretty progressive. It's kind of like a progressive, almost like oasis, in America, it seems, or one of. And I wanted to do something addressing the election, but most of my family voted for Trump, at least in 2016. And I have a lot of, I have a lot of friends, so I have friends on both sides. I don't discriminate, politically. I welcome healthy debate and conversation, but I don't take anything personally, which I think is healthy. But I know from talking to people who lean, far right or even far right, is that facts almost don't even matter anymore. Like you can't even really. People are going to have their opinion, and I love the show The Gilded Age I'm watching right now, and one of the characters perfectly articulated something. There was a line of dialogue where she casually says, don't let facts get in the way of my opinion, or I don't let facts get in the way of my opinion, which is, I think, really kind of maybe as a way to describe the current political state. So anyways, I wanted to do something addressing politics without being too divisive or political. So I figured the one thing we can't really talk about why your side is bad. So, well, one thing we can do is, I painted in a way, picture of our progressive, almost utopian version of our inclusive nation state of California. So this is kind of like my progressive view of California in a way. It's not just photography, but it's a lot of quotes from writers from California or writers talking about California. And it's a collection of 110 photographers from all over California. And it really celebrates California, what makes California unique, what makes California what it is, my view of what defines California. And so it started as an exhibit in 2020 in March. We had an incredible opening, and then COVID hit like days later. So suddenly I was like, oh man, because you put a lot of work into these shows. A lot of people show up to the opening, and then it's up for a month, and you're hoping people show up and ideally buy work. But so that wasn't really happening. So then I realized I was going to be home for a while. So I switched gears, and I like doing books. I sell prints, but I feel like I could get my work out to much more people if I could put it in the form of a book that's accessible and could get out to a fairly wide range of people. So I've always I had envisioned it as a book that I was trying to see if I could put together before the exhibit. And luckily I didn't, because it ended up becoming a much better, much bigger, much fuller vision now that I had more time after the exhibit had opened. So yeah, so when COVID hit, I switched gears and I hit the ground running, and I reached out to photographers who I knew, and I reached out to photographers who I didn't know, and I put together this book. It's 110 photographers. It's over 600 images. It's 320 pages, and it is a really big meal. And I wanted to make it a big meal because my first book, American Bachelor, is a 130 some pages. And I had a friend who said, "Oh, I saw your book. I went to the bookstore and it was so good. I went through the whole thing." But she didn't buy it. Oh. So I'm very aware of that. Like, if you're doing a book, it's nice to have something that you can't just go through in one sitting.
Yeah.
You need to take it home. You need to spend some time with it. And also, I think the more time you spend with it too, it packs a more emotional punch to it. It stays with people more. And yeah, I'm very, very proud of it. I'm very proud of it. I worked on it for a while, and it came out right around the time of the 2020 election. And we won.
There you go.
I don't want to be divisive. I know you have a wide audience.
I love a lot of things about your book, and I think I told you in an email that I sent to you that it feels, at least having grown up in California, that there's a lot of it that feels very familiar. But also, I find what's interesting is that, and I was thinking about this right before, we as photographers tend to photograph the things that we find interesting, or I feel like photographers love a good juxtaposition, right? We love a good, expensive car, and then on the sidewalk is a homeless man or something. That's a very common photo that you could think of. And when you look through the book, there's a lot of photos that I feel meet that juxtaposition, which is strange because it's like, that's not necessarily like that's not the everyday California, right? That is something interesting that happened in that time. So I want to know, like, for the book, was there a visual element? Was there what was it that was tying the entire book together outside of, all these photos just happened in California? Does that make sense?
Juxtaposition. I mean, that's the history of art, right? I mean, like the artists have been, doing this forever. Artists writers. And I guess the thing that ties the book together is just my curation. I've been curating for a while. I'm very picky. It's hard to buy gifts for me because I'm very specific about what I like. It's hard to shop for me. I hate shopping myself. But yeah, and when I curate, I handpick everything that's in the show, and people will show up, to the gallery with stuff, or they assume that it's just like this, like free for all, where anyone can bring what they want. And I don't think that that's the best recipe for a great piece of art. I mean,
Sure.
people don't usually gravitate towards compromised pieces of work, in general. So like yeah, I mean, so I guess everything's filtered through my taste, and that comes from my life experience and me traveling and me going to museums. Like I enjoy going to museums. Not everybody does. Like when I go, some people, like, their idea of an ideal vacation is to sit on a beach and drink a beer or a margarita and do nothing at all, which good for them. I mean, like, you should do what makes you happy for 100%. I like more cultural experiences. So I'm always going to museums. I lived in Paris for a little while, and I went to museums constantly. I'm always going to galleries. Luckily, I live in Los Angeles, which is possibly the cultural capital of the world. I mean, I go to museums and gallery shows all the time. I'm always constantly looking at stuff. I get daily email blasts from like Lens Scratch, Your Photo Daily, The Eye of Photography. I'm always looking. I'm always discovering new work. I'm always looking at stuff. So that's, that hones my filter, and then the book is a compilation of my years of experience and things I've seen and things that I gravitate towards and things that I love, and eliminating things that I don't like, or things that maybe are too repetitive. Like, sometimes I'll pass on something. It's not because I don't like it, because I already have this other thing that's very similar, and I don't want to put two things that are too similar. So there is an art to creation, and I recommend. I think curation and photo editing are so important for a photographer. Not just going out and creating the work, but really honing and sharpening your eye, and your taste is extremely important. So yeah, curation has absolutely defined who I am as a photographer, I'd have to say.
Hey, Raymond here, and we will get back to the show in just a moment. Let me ask you, were you happy with your photos when you were just taking snapshots with your phone or a point-and-shoot camera? Of course not. You wanted to unleash your creativity and capture the world with your unique vision. That's why you bought a DSLR. My free ebook, 46 Free Creative Photography Ideas, is built on that premise of taking ordinary ideas and using your creativity to make something uniquely your own. That ability to think outside of the box is what makes world-class photographers so successful. It's not their camera gear or their fancy lenses, but it's their ability to come up with a creative idea and execute. So download your free copy of 46 Creative Photo Ideas now by heading over to creativeimageIdeas.com. That is creativeimageIdeas.com. Now, let's go ahead and get back on into today's interview. You said that there's 110 photographers in this book, right?
Yeah.
I want to know, how did the process start? Did you just reach out to these photographers and say, "Hey, can you send me 4 or 5 photos?" Or did you say, "Hey, send me all of your photos. I want to pick out your best ones to put into this book"?
I'm pretty good about going through, and I'm pretty quick, so I could fly through a lot of images pretty quickly. So I had people, I wanted everyone to be happy. So it's kind of a negotiation. Like, I want the photographer to show what they want to show, but at the same time, I'm looking at the whole book. Like, they're not looking at 320 pages. They're looking at just their,
Sure.
what's in there. So they're just seeing like a small piece of it. So, yeah, I mean, with some photographers, it's a negotiation, and some it's more than others, and some are just very open to, yeah, whatever you want to put in, go ahead. Most people, whatever they're putting up publicly on the web, on the internet, they're going to be happy with already, or they wouldn't post it. So it's already kind of pre-filtered and pre-approved on some level. So I'm really looking at that, or they're sending me stuff, and ideally they're not sending me stuff. This is a good lesson for photographers, because you could really tell some, and it doesn't even really matter if you're a beginner or even more advanced. Some people are really good about deliberately sending images to me, like a concise file of images that are ready to go. And some will send me so many images, and it's like, why are you sending me 4 photos of the exact same thing? I mean, that just shows it's almost amateurish, and these are not amateur photographers, So again, photo editing, you have to spend the time photo editing. You have to be able to look, and and working as a commercial photographer does help with this. Like if you're shooting headshots, I've done headshots for years. And when you're shooting, if you shoot like 4 rolls of someone and they all look fair, if you have like 2 rolls of the same setup, you have to be able to pick which is the best one. And yeah, there are 5 that are great, but narrow down the 5, like pick one. Like, and it's and maybe it's not perfect. It's completely subjective, but that's a choice. You have to start making those choices, and that's going to help you define your work. And so when you have like 3 shots of like, a car or a bird, like you have to pick what's the best photo. It's a challenge, and it's not easy, but you got to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's tricky. So some photographers, it was easier to narrow down than others. But at the end of the day, again, it was like everything in the book I'm happy with.
So this was, just so that I'm clear here. You would ask photographers for some of their work, and then would they choose the photos that would go in the book, or they would send you photos and then you would ultimately choose the ones that go in the book?
Yeah, I just realized I didn't answer your question. It was kind of a little bit of both. Like I would first tell them what I was doing with the book, and people are a little suspicious, or what are you going to do with my images, whatever. So I thought if they knew me, they saw what I did, they've seen my book, then they were cool with it. But I was also reaching out to people who I didn't know and didn't know me, so I had to like tell them who I was and kind of sell them on the project. And usually I'm not going to approach someone unless I know specifically which images are theirs that I already want to include. So it was mostly me saying I would like to include these images, and then let's talk about any other images that you might want to include.
Mm.
So it usually started out that way. It was, and then once LACP came on, which is the Los Angeles Center of Photography, which everyone listening should consider joining. They have incredible classes, been around forever, founded by Julia Dean, an amazing photographer and educator. And all proceeds for the California book go to the Los Angeles Center of Photography. Once they came on, then we did a call for submissions through LACP. So then people submitted and I selected, but again, it was me selecting. And then once I selected, then it was a conversation with the photographer to open it up to include possible other submissions that they wanted to submit.
So is it safe to say that you saw tens of thousands of images in the curation of your book here?
Possibly. Yeah,
Okay.
possibly.
So
I didn't keep count, but yeah.
did you say how many photos are in the book?
Over 600.
So how do you make the decision for which photo stands out over the rest? How do you get from 10,000 to 600? Is there an example maybe of photos that you liked, but again, just didn't fit the book or something of that nature?
Yeah, it's funny because like they're professional photographers who had great images, but they were created a few years ago and maybe the original got lost in a hard drive that crashed, or they can't find the negative, and they just have like maybe they just have an image that had a watermark on it. So I was surprised that there was a decent amount of those images, which is
Wow.
which happens in life, and yeah, it just really comes down to the curatorial process. I've having been making images for decades, editing and then curating. I'm pretty clear about what I like. And sorry, what's the question again? I know we're talking about how did I refine, how did I get down to how did I make selections?
Yeah,
I guess you just know what you like,
Yeah, you know what you like. Okay, so
but maybe it's not for everybody too. I mean, there are other skills that I don't have that other people do. This
no,
is
no,
just
no, no,
something
no.
that I've done.
No, I get that. I get that. I get the you know what you like, and I think that after, um, shooting professionally for 10 plus years, like I understand that sometimes there's something about a photo you don't know what it is, you just like it, and you're going to choose that one, and you're going to move on. But I know that a lot of people just getting started. Oftentimes, one of the most asked questions in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook community is like, which one is better, A or B? And I'm trying to, I guess, give
Yeah.
some solid information that people can get on how they can make the decision on their own through how do you make decisions on your own for the photos that went
I
into
think
the
it's a
book.
great question. I think it starts with, well, if you happen to be watching this on YouTube,
Are
this
those
is
photo
part
books?
of my photo book
Oh
collection.
my.
I'm obsessed. It used to be vinyl, and I started selling off my vinyl. There used to be a wall of vinyl, so now I'm obsessed. I buy like so many, and I have a bunch over here that I'm still going through that I just got.
Wow.
So, and I'm going to libraries, I'm going to bookstores constantly. If you're in Los Angeles, please visit Arcana store. It's a bookstore of the arts. Visit Hennessy and Ingalls downtown. Incredible. Book Soup has a really great curation of photo books. Uh, obviously Strand in New York. There are so many great bookstores. There are great library collections where you could find out of print books. I'm constantly looking at stuff, so that is going to help you make choices. And yeah, you just got to keep like looking at stuff. I think that's how you sharpen your eye.
And just taking note of what it is that you don't like versus what it is that you don't like.
Yeah, and I think, and then talking, being around smart people with good taste helps, and you're having conversations about things, and you're debating, and you're defending what you like, and you're hearing someone else defend what they like, and maybe you're forming your opinions based on not only what you see, but you're getting information from other people. Yeah, I think it's a lifelong process, and things evolve too, and things change. Like I'll be selling, but like I'll buy a book and I'm really into it, and then maybe 10 years later I'm thinking, oh, I'm kind of not so into this now. Like maybe I've moved on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this is kind of, I guess, a side question. This isn't necessarily about the photography, but when it comes to the book, it's full of photos. You said over 600 photos. Can I ask why the cover is illustrated art?
So yeah, I wanted the cover to be something where, because I go to bookstores a lot, I go to libraries, I look at a lot of books, I buy a lot of books, and I wanted the cover to just really jump out at you, to where you go look at this and you go, what the hell is this thing? I need to check this out. Like, so there's something about this cover to me that, and I worked with the designer a lot. He was, funny enough, he's from California, but he was in Hawaii at the time. So this kind of definitely has like a beach, it's on the water and
Yeah.
everything. So Hawaii may have helped the visual, the bright colors. But yeah, I just wanted to have a cover that really jumps out at you, where it just draws you in. My first book, American Bachelor, has a photo on the cover. My second book, Folsom Street, is an illustration. My fourth book, this casino book I'm working on, is probably going to be an illustration that I'm working on right now. It's I think for a cover, in my opinion, you just want to have something that just really grabs your attention, that really gets you thinking. There are a lot of photographers who really want to go for a traditional like linen, with just text, and I totally respect that. I have a lot of books that are like that myself. It's just it's just a personal taste.
Mm-hmm.
But it does grab your attention.
It does. It really does. And that, like, the first thing that I thought of, I was like, this photo screams California, with the palm trees and the beach and the taco on front.
Thank you.
I will say, looking through the book, though, I was hoping that there would be more photos of tacos, but that's fine. It's fine. At least it's on the cover.
There are tacos represented, and there's a great Jonathan Gold quote about tacos as well. Actually, there are at least two mentions of tacos.
Still about
all tacos matter.
Yeah, all tacos. I love tacos. That's too funny. I like that perspective, though, because that's really interesting. I feel like you're thinking of your book. Obviously, hold on. What am I trying to say here? So when it comes to putting together a book, there's something that you're trying to say. This is your visual mixtape of California. This is what California represents to you. But there's still obviously a business aspect of it for you to think about and stress over the front of this book in the hopes that it's going to obviously sell more. So when it comes to creating books, again, this is a world that's pretty foreign to me. Were there any decisions that you had to make about the book strictly in the hopes that it sells over your own artistic desires?
Luckily, I think my tastes are fairly commercial, like not uncommercial, I guess, if that's a word. Going back to the cover, though, another factor is there's 110 photographers. So if I had one image, then I'd have to pick one photographer. So it was much easier to avoid that with an illustration. So that was also a factor in. I think in general you have to be aware of an audience. If you're making a book and you want it to sell at a bookstore, someone is going to have to want the book to be sold at that store, so they're going to have to pick it. If you end up lucky enough to afford a publicist, they're going to have to figure out some way to market it and sell it. So you have to kind of think about marketing. What's interesting about this? Why would someone want to buy it? And books are expensive. If you're a novelist or a poet, or if you're a writer, period, you could create books on demand. You could just have the file existing on the cloud, and then as someone buys the book, it could be printed and sent directly to them through Amazon or publishing services. There are companies that do that. You can do that with Blur, but the expense is so much higher, and you don't have quality control. Like I want to be able to look at the the same with a print. You could get prints sold where it'll go directly from a third party to to the customer, but I would want to be able to look at it. Plus, you want to sign it. I would want a signed print if I'm buying a print. So for photographers, it's a little tricky. For artists, So yeah, the expense of making the books, they're heavy. The expense of moving them around, the expense of distribution, it's not cheap. So you have to. In California, love retails for $50, which is a pretty good value considering other fine art photography books. But a lot of people, that's a big expense for a lot of people.
Sure.
So you do have to think in terms of it being commercial enough, it being desirable to a wide enough audience to justify the cost, and just to get it just to get it into people's hands.
Yeah. Now, with all the time that you've been making books, as you said, you're on your fourth book now. Uh, how deep does the vision go before the book is created? We as photographers are taught, like what makes you stand out is the pre-visualization process, right? The more that you can visualize the photo in your head before you take it, the better it's going to be. So is it the same with the book? Like, are you thinking in terms of hard and soft cover, paper types, number of pages, amount of text? Like, are all these things planned out before you like really started putting the book together, or was it done? Was it more of an organic process?
The designer that I worked with on my first book, his name is Damon Robinson. He's just brilliant. He worked in I think it was called industrial design. So he worked with like packaging and stuff for a while. He's an illustrator, designer, and we spent a lot of time figuring out how the look and the design of the first book. And it was a lot of what I wanted based on my photo collection and books that I at the time I went to a ton of bookstores, and I found this one book by Lee Friedlander called Cottage.
Mm.
That's I don't think it's that popular. I haven't really seen it around too much, but the shape of it was perfect. It just fits so perfectly ergonomically in my hand. So I copied that exact size, and I like square format for me because I tend to shoot both landscape and horizontal orientation. So with a square book, you could fit both in uh, fairly easily. Uh, and you could kind of play with grid patterns and stuff, so you could have more than one image on a page, and it just works out really well for me. So I figured out a design with America Bachelor, and I just copied that. I would recommend just, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Find something that works for you, and once I figured out that, then I'm pretty much using the same template in InDesign for my future books, because it's something that I already kind of did all the work myself with figuring out what's perfect for me.
Yeah.
And again, that's in my voice. That has to do with all the stuff that I've seen and what I like. Not everybody likes square. Some people, if you know that you're shooting more landscape or more portrait, if you're doing all portraits, then it might not make sense to have a square book. You'd want more of a portrait orientation. So these are all choices that are very, very subjective and very specific, to the individual.
I think that you just like breezed over something that was really important there. That was, you know, in photography, we have to create our own visual style and we have to shoot the things that we love in the way that we love them. But you're taking that to another level. Like, I also love books and I want to create books in this style that I love and the way that I like to enjoy them. And then you're merging them together, which has to just be a really, really fulfilling process to see photos that you love in a format that you love as well. That was very cool.
Oh
Um,
man, I'll tell you, like, I don't have kids, but when my first book came out, and then seeing the book do well outside of me, and then I had a book signing, and people were showing up who weren't friends of mine, but just they knew the book and
yeah,
they wanted to be part of it. I feel like I got the pride of when you have a kid and your kid does something. Like, I felt like I had that pride. And these are
sure,
my babies. I have three babies. I've heard other photographers talk about that.
yeah.
These are my babies. I have three babies, and I have a fourth on the way.
I love that. That's such a great way to think about it. You know, there's got to be that deep personal connection there.
Yeah, it's
With
our creation.
Right, yeah, exactly. Uh, you said something earlier about curating. You said that you're working with, or that you've seen photos from even just like a senior in high school, right? And I think it can be difficult. I know who I was as a senior in high school, and it was not any sort of I wasn't able to create any sort of visual story, I suppose, out of my head with the camera. But I want to know, from somebody who's seen a lot of images like yourself, when do you think a photographer goes from somebody who's just taking snapshots to an artist?
That's a great question, and it's a very, very important question. And the answer is, again, it's completely subjective. Some people, from early on, have a really strong voice, and I mean, I think that goes back to, I mean, think of like junior high. There's some kids who are just so funny and just are so idiosyncratic, you know, and then there are people who maybe develop their voice like a little bit later. And that's, and who knows where that comes from. But photography is interesting. And Chuck Close, the artist, talks about photography being one of the, I'm paraphrasing and I'm sure I'm going to chop it up, but he talks about photography being the easiest art to pick up, but the hardest to develop a voice in. Probably, especially now because it's so ubiquitous, it's so everywhere. Everyone has a camera in their pocket. So to actually have a voice in photography, you know, now is I think that's really the trick. And I don't know what my voice is. I think my voice has to do with emotion, has to do with finding packing some sort of like an emotional punch. Although I was very complimented because in this exhibit that I have up now at the Hive Gallery, I had multiple people come up and they said, "Oh, I knew exactly which pieces were yours," which is a huge compliment, you know, because it's salon style and it's not all clustered together. But to have I think to get to that point is I think is the goal as a photographer, to be able to have someone say, "Oh, I know that that's yours. I know that that's your piece." Now with post-production, with Lightroom and Photoshop, you could do a lot of stuff in post. You could have a certain style, uh, but sometimes that's just kind of putting a style over your image. So I think you could tell when it's something that's more organically created, and the voice comes from a deeper place than just like, you know, like just like something that's covering it. But that is the goal. I think that is the goal, and the answer is keep doing it. You just got to keep doing it. Pick up the camera, go out as much as you can, capture, shoot, create as much as you can, edit as much as you can. All the work that you do culminates into finding your voice.
That's perfect. Can you think of a photographer who you would consider has a really strong photographic voice?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot, and it's like there's a name that is in my head right now, but I'm sure there are many others, and I'm sure friends are probably going to say, "Oh, why don't you mention me?" There's a woman named Wendy Schneider who I've never met, and I think she's out of Colorado, and her work is so idiosyncratic. It almost looks like there's a real painterly element to it. But whenever I see her work, I know exactly. I know exactly that it's hers, and there are many others. I'm not. I'm sure I'll think of a bunch, and I don't know if I could send you a list, a follow up list,
No,
but
no, 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 no.
off the top of my head.
There was a follow up question to that, which is, what?
Sorry, there's one more that came to
Yes.
Ryan Ryan Schutte, who's in the book. He does these amazing. They're almost like Jeff Wall type,
Yes.
very large kind of tableaus.
Of
Let me
there was
of
one. It was
a
right
lot of
towards.
characters, and they're definitely they're staged. Um, there's George Byrne is out of LA, whose work is copied a lot, but he was the first person that I've seen him doing very illustrative kind of style. Flipping through the book now because I'm sure there are a lot in the book.
It's funny. I actually had it opened to Ryan's page right before this interview, and I closed it to bring the book over here. And now I wish that I didn't, because, as you said, I mean, there's a lot there. Obviously, the characters. I was drawn to the landscape photos that he had. Just the light that was being used was absolutely phenomenal there. But I guess the follow up question that I wanted.
His work's incredible, and he has a book. I highly recommend getting his book. It's great.
Do you know the title of it offhand?
I think it's just his monograph with his name. Boom.
Look at that! Wow, that is gorgeous. Okay,
Great.
I'm definitely gonna have to look that up.
Yeah. You should have him. You should have him on your show. He might send you a free copy.
Do you know him personally?
Yeah, he's great.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to use your name when
I'll
I
connect
out.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll connect you. He's great.
Thank you. The question that I wanted to know was, when you look at photographers with a clear photographic, visual storytelling ability, right? Like you look at their work and you know that it's theirs. What are those elements? Like, okay, hold on. Sorry, that was way too vague of a question. That was way too.
How long do we have here?
Yeah. Let's take Ryan for example. Right, Ryan's work doesn't look like your work. It doesn't look like Wendy's work. Is it simply finding one thing and just going really deep into that, whether it be I don't know, composition, light, whatever the characters that you use, or is it more questioning yourself and the decisions that you're making in order to create the photos that you want? I don't know if that was a good question or not, but I'm going to see if there's anything that you have to say about that.
I feel like we're kind of getting into like a philosophical, almost like existential concept of like, where do you get your voice? What makes you do the things that you do?
Mhm.
And I think it all comes down to, like who are you as a person? Like, do you have like an examined life? Are you always questioning things? Are you, what relationships have you been in? Like and how have those relationships in your life affected you? I think your work is a result of every book you've read.